Welcome to the Philippine Science Heritage Center's new Salinlahi Science Center, honoring our top Filipino scientists and their game-changing contributions to the world of science. Know more about all of them and let the Salinlahi Science Center be your gateway into their minds. Salinlahi.
Ganyan din ang tawag sa mga bagong botante dahil kayo ang aangat sa bayan.
Reminded of our house rules. Proper decorum is expected among all participants. Any act of disrespect and rudeness shall not be tolerated throughout the duration of the webinar. Kindly key in your questions for the panelists in the Q&A. These will be answered during the open forum.
Welcome to the Philippine Science Heritage Center's new Salin-Lahi Science Center, honoring our top Filipino scientists and their game-changing contributions to the world of science. Know more about all of them and let the Salin-Lahi Science Center be your gateway into their minds. Salin-Lahi.
Ganyan din ang tawag sa mga bagong botante dahil kayo ang aangat sa bayan.
We begin, please be reminded of our house rules. Proper decorum is expected among all participants. Any act of disrespect and rudeness shall not be tolerated throughout the duration of the webinar. Kindly key in your questions for the panelists in the Q&A. These will be answered during the open forum.
Welcome to the Philippine Science Heritage Center's new Salin-Lahi Science Center, honoring our top Filipino scientists and their game-changing contributions to the world of science. Know more about all of them and let the Salin-Lahi Science Center be your gateway into their minds. Salin-Lahi.
Reminded of our house rules. Proper decorum is expected among all participants. Any act of disrespect and rudeness shall not be tolerated throughout the duration of the webinar. Kindly key in your questions for the panelists in the Q&A. These will be answered during the open forum.
Magandang umaga po sa lahat. In behalf of NAST Philippines and Towns Foundation, I am honored to welcome you to the first installment of the webinar series on climate change entitled Addressing the Challenges of Climate Change on Food and Nutrition Security and Health. I'm Karen Davila, 2013 Towns Awardee for Journalism and Media Broadcasting, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Let your friends know that you're attending this activity. Please use the official hashtags PhilippiNast and pagtugon sa climate change. Now, a few reminders for this activity. Kindly mute your microphones during the talks. Please key in your questions in the Q&A box of our Zoom. For those who are streaming in the NAST Philippines Facebook Live, kindly key in your questions in the comment section. Now, the speakers will answer your questions during the open forum. To receive an e-certificate for attending this activity, participants are requested to fill out an evaluation form after the program. The link to the evaluation form will be flashed later on. At this point, let's hear from the academician at Towns awardee, Aurora C. Matias, member of the Engineering Sciences and Technology Division of NAST Philippines. She'll be giving the remarks on behalf of NAST President Rodora Azanza. Good morning to you, ma'am.
Good morning, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, fellow town sisters, my dear friends and colleagues of science, technology, and innovation. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. On behalf of the National Academy of Science and Technology Philippines and our President, Dr. Rodora Azanza, I am honored to welcome you to the first installment of the webinar series on climate change entitled Addressing the Challenges of Climate Change on Food and Nutrition, Security, and Health. The NAST Task Force on Climate Change, chaired by academician Rex Victor Cruz, with academician Juan Pulhin as co-chair, in collaboration with the Outstanding Women in the Nation's Service Foundation Incorporated, led by our president, Cecilia Orena Drilon, organized this webinar series on climate change, also known as NAST Towns Talks. The series of talks aims to inform the general public, particularly our youth, about the changing climate situation in the Philippines and how this will affect the Filipino way of life. We would like to thank Dr. Carlos Primero Gundran, Academician Glenn Gregorio, Dr. Maria Sofia Amara, Dr. Maria Angelo Promentilla, Dr. Esperanza Cabral, Dr. Maria Regina Justina Estuar, Dr. Geraldine Zamora, and Ms. Karen Davila for accepting the invitation to share your expertise and your time in the NAST Towns Talks. We are looking forward to the excellent presentation and fruitful discussions during the open forum. Thank you and a pleasant morning to everyone.
Thank you very much, ma'am. In the next hour, our panelists and reactors will discuss and exchange their thoughts on the issues about climate change, food and nutrition security and health in a global or regional perspective, and what we can do now so that we can thrive in this environment. I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Carlos Primero Gundran. Our first panelist will discuss on climate change and health. Currently, Dr. Gundran is an assistant professor at the Department of Health Policy and Administration, the College of Public Health at the University of the Philippines, Manila. He is also the current medical director at the TransCare Emergency Medical Services in San Juan and convener at the Health Emergencies and Disasters Study Group, the National Institute of Health, the University of the Philippines, Manila. His publications mainly involve disaster risk reduction and management, disaster response, and medical disaster management. Our next panelist is Glenn Gregorio. Academician Glenn Gregorio will be discussing the topic on climate change and food security. Gregorio is a member of the Agricultural Sciences Division of NAST Philippines. He is currently the director of Southeast Asian Regional Center for Graduate Study and Research in Agriculture and a professor of the College of Agriculture and Food Science at the UP Los Baños. He was also awarded as the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit Champion. Our third panelist is Dr. Maria Sofia Amara. She will be discussing points about climate change and nutrition. Dr. Amara is currently an associate professor at the Department of Food and Science Nutrition of the College of Home Economics at the University of the Philippines. She's a registered dietitian and obtained her degree in PhD nutrition from the University of the Philippines. She also received a certificate in biochemistry from the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine from UP. Dr. Amara was previously the director for nutrition research at the International Life Sciences Institute based in Singapore. And our first reactor, Dr. Esperanza Cabral, the former Health Secretary and former Towns Awardee, 1986 Towns Awardee, will be giving her reaction to the presentation on climate change and health. She was the Secretary of Health in 2010. Prior to this, she was the Secretary of the DSWD between 2006 to 2010. She is a cardiologist, was once the Chief of Cardiology of the Asian Hospital and Medical Center and the Director of the Philippine Heart Center. She's a member of the PGH Medical Foundation Board of Governors and the Chair of Healthcare Without Harm of Southeast Asia. Reactor 2 is Dr. Maria Regina Justina Estuar. Our second reactor is a full professor at the Department of Information Systems and Computer Science of the Ateneo de Manila University. She heads the Ateneo Social Computing Laboratory and is currently the executive director of the Ateneo Center for Computing Competency and Research. Her research area includes e-health systems, specifically on electronic medical records. She was a 2019 Towns Awardee. Reactor number 3 is Dr. Geraldine Zamora, our last but not the least reactor. Dr. Zamora graduated as class valedictorian in the UP College of Medicine in 2005 and was awarded the Outstanding Young Men or TOYM awardee in 2016. In 2019, she was a Towns Awardee for her contributions in medicine. Her passion is geared towards the undeserved, and she is presently a board member of the Asia Pacific Young Rheumatologist Group, Vice President of the Hope for Lupus Foundation, and a board member of the Sagip Buhay Medical Foundation. Now, at the end of this webinar, we hope that we would be able to inform the general public and in particular the youth about the changing climate situation in the Philippines and how this will affect our way of life. Again, I'm reminding everyone that the Q&A will be done after the presentations of our speakers. Kindly key in your questions in the Q&A section of our Zoom participants and in the comment section for those streaming at Facebook Live. So we begin now with Dr. Gondran.
Thank you, Karen. Let me share my screen. Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm tasked to talk about climate change and health. So, sorry. Okay, so So the Philippines has consistently ranked as top 5 in occurrence of natural disasters and reported victims. So lagi tayong actually nasa top 5, no? Sa most affected by natural disasters and victims around the world, as you can see in this graph, no? Climate change now exacerbates the impact of disasters. So idagdag natin yung climate change sa disasters, mas nagiging severe yung mga disasters natin. Projected changes in climate patterns affect every aspect of human life, no? And the impacts of future changes of climate extremes will fall disproportionately on the poor and the vulnerable. So mas apektado yung mga mahihirap at saka yung mga vulnerable populations natin, no? So this was actually lifted from the study done by Manuta, Simple and Vidal titled Mainstreaming DRR and CCA, no? In Mindanao, cases from South Cotabato, no, in 2021. Now, what are the impacts of climate change to health? No? So these are the following impact that will pose an impact to health from climate change. No, meron tayo extreme temperatures, extreme events, air quality, vector-borne, it could be waterborne, and it could affect our mental health. No? So for extreme temperatures, dito sa atin, sa ating bansa, it's more likely yung heat wave rather than yung cold wave, no? Sa ibang bansa, yung mga may winter, cold wave. Pero sa atin, heat wave usually. And what does heat wave cause to our health? It could cause heat cramps, heat edema, heat exhaustion, at saka heat stroke, no? Ito yung mga extreme temperature-related effects nito sa ating kalusugan, no? Number 2, extreme events, no? So with climate change, mas tumitindi yung mga bagyo, mas lumalakas yung mga hangin, mas lumalakas yung precipitation, no? Naalala ko, early 1980s, ang pinakamalakas na bagyo nun, signal number 3. Pero nung dumating yung milenyo, nagkaroon tayo ng signal number 4. And then nung dumating itong Haiyan, nagkaroon na tayo ng number 5, no? So, extreme events na ito, no? More frequent and intense precipitation, mas matindi, mas madalas, and more intense typhoon, no? And kasama ng extreme events, yung sea level rises, no? So kung titignan naman natin itong graph na to, no, ito yung mga occurrences ng natural disasters over the years, no? So mas dumadami yung mga recorded nating natural disasters. Air quality, no? So again, climate change is caused by carbon CO2 emissions, no? So we have pollutants in the air, no? The air quality, mas marami kang allergens, mas marami kang pollutants, mas less healthy para sa atin yung air natin, no? So what will be its effects on our health? Exacerbation of reactive airway disease like asthma, COPD, no? It could lead to lung cancer and it could lead to premature deaths. Now, vector-borne disease, ito yung dala ng mga nagke-carry ng mga diseases like mga insekto, mga daga, mga snails, no? Causes disease outbreaks by affecting seasonality, distribution, prevalence of vector-borne diseases. So naapektuhan natin ang mga vectors niya, so nagkukos tayo ng mga outbreaks, no? So dahil na-affect natin ang habitat ng mga insekto na ito, mas lalo tayong na-expose sa kanila, and then, syempre, increased risk of pathogens being carried to humans sa atin. Like for example, pag nagbaha, yung ihi ng daga, leptospirosis, no? So those are vector-borne diseases, no? Waterborne diseases, no? Dahil madalas ang baha, no? Increasing exposure to water-related contaminants due to fresh water runoff, kuminsan, drought pa, no? Or sea level rise or coastal flooding or storm surge, no? So exposed tayo dito. So sa mga choleras, schistosomiasis. And then yung mental health natin, no? Based on the level of exposure to the extreme weather events. And then siyempre yung mga traumatic injuries, yung mga nakita mong nakakabagabag ng damdamin sa paligid mo, siyempre apektado din yung ating mental health, no? So in summary, ano ba yung effects ng climate change sa health natin? Because of vector-borne diseases, meron tayong cases nag-increase ang cases ng dengue, leptospirosis, malaria, for example, no? Just to mention a few. And then meron tayong mga waterborne diseases like schistosomiasis and cholera. I would like to mention a study done by Chua and Salazar, just released this March 2021, no? Diarrheal morbidity and mortality in the Philippines, investigating the spatiotemporal impact of climate weather, no? Ang sabi nila dito, diarrhea is associated with daily temperatures, rainfall, flood, and typhoon. So, merong relation yung increase in diarrhea cases natin dito sa Pilipinas sa bawat increase ng temperature sa iba't ibang lugar ng ating bansa, no? So merong relationship ang climate change sa diarrhea, no? Diarrheal cases or waterborne diseases. O foodborne diseases, meron din tayong mga food na nagkukos ng diarrhea and typhoid, no? So apektado din sila. Okay, for respiratory diseases, no? Ano ba yung mga respiratory diseases? Sinabi natin kanina, reactive airway diseases like asthma, bronchitis, no? And syempre, predilection to increased respiratory infections, no? Heat-related illness, minention na natin kanina, heat stroke, heat exhaustion, and dehydration, no? And lastly, our mental health, no, included din siya sa effects nito sa ating health, no? Ikaw mismo may na trauma or nakita mo yung paligid mo na trauma, no? So this was lifted naman sa study sa study na ito, no? Philippine Climate Change Assessment, Impacts, Vulnerabilities and Adaptation by the Climate Change Commission and the Oscar M. Lopez Center, released last 2017. So basically, these are the effects of climate change sa pangkalusugan natin, especially dito sa Pilipinas, no? Tinignan lang natin yung mga most common diseases resulting from climate change dito sa Philippines. And nilift natin as much as possible sa mga existing studies, no? So ano yung message natin sa ating kabataan at sa ating community? Action point for citizens are the following, no? We have to reduce the greenhouse gases, no? Yung CO2 emissions natin. So how can we contribute in doing that? Number one, recycling, no? I-recycle natin yung mga basura natin. And number two, siguro tree planting, no? Avoid burning garbage, no? Kaya nga pinagbawal na ng DNR yung incinerations, no? Number two, prevent transmission of disease. Paano natin magagawa ito? Syempre, kailangan malinis tayo sa katawan natin at sa paligid natin, no? And then, example nito, yung new normal recommendation natin ngayon for COVID is actually one way of mitigating this, no? Pag nagawa natin ito, pag sinunod natin ito, is development ito sa ating community. Bakit ko sinabing development? Kasi pag sinunod natin ang new normal, mas magiging resilient tayo in transmitting the coronavirus. Therefore, pag mas resilient tayo, that is actually a development of the community. In-improve mo yung society natin to be resilient in infectious disease transmissions like the coronavirus. And number three, water and sanitation and proper waste management, diba? So, example is removing unnecessary stagnant water sources, yung sources ng dengue, no? So, these are the three action points I can share to our young citizens and the community para makatulong tayo to improve our health during in this period of climate change, no? I think hanggang dito lang po ang aking presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gudran. Thank you so much, sir. Okay, wait, let me turn this on. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for that. Clearly, you have summarized the effects of climate change on a practical level when it comes to our everyday lives and our physical health. And now I'd like to call in Dr. Cabral for her reaction.
Maraming salamat, Karen. Thank you so much for the invitation to react to the presentation of Dr. Gundran on climate and health to the NAST and the towns. And congratulations to Dr. Gundran for a good discussion on the impacts of climate change on health. Climate change is a public health emergency. Why? Because it directly affects human health and threatens the stability of the healthcare system. Understanding the effects of climate change on human health and the healthcare delivery system is critical, not just for healthcare professionals, but for their patients as well. Interventions that protect human health and ensure the resiliency of the healthcare system are needed. Indeed, climate change contributes to certain conditions of ill health and death through extreme temperatures, extreme events such as typhoons and floods, droughts and fires, and pollution, not just of the air, but also of water and soil. The diseases they cause, including vector-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue, waterborne diseases such as many types of diarrhea, are leading causes of death and disability in the world. Air pollution contributes not just to death from airway diseases, but also to deaths from cancers, strokes, and heart diseases. They result from the airborne dispersion of hazardous materials and allergens. Air pollution is estimated to contribute to over 2 million deaths in the Western Pacific region alone and over 7 million globally. While air pollution is the major environmental risk to health, water and soil pollution are also important environmental risks to health. Infectious and chemical water and soil pollution also contribute significantly to disease and death. Vulnerability to climate change is unevenly distributed between the wealthy and the poor, men and women, the young and the elderly, urban and rural populations. Understanding these changes, the nature of adaptation to climate change, mitigation practices, and interventions on climate change. Just as climate change impacts on our health, human activities are a major cause of climate change and the loss of ecosystem integrity. Human activities are reducing the capacity of the ecosystem to provide their goods, such as fresh water, food, and medicinal products, and services, such as the purification of air, water, and soil, and the sequestration of pollutants. Just as climate change can result in harm to our health practices can result in harm to the environment and contribute to climate change. For example, hospitals use a lot of natural resources and produce lots of potential dangerous wastes and pollutants, including plastics, infectious, electronic, and electrical waste. The health industry adds significantly to air pollution through its use of fossil fuels. Accordingly, health leaders need to evolve the Hippocratic principle of first do no harm beyond the immediacy of the doctor-patient relationship to a more global vision of environmental health. The planet is our patient too. As the primary sector with a healing mission, the health sector must band together to address the climate crisis and protect the people. Our strong motivation to create a sustainable society must evolve into understanding the relationship among environmental, economic, and social dimensions, and then to expertise that can contribute to the creation of a sustainable society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cabral. And I would like to call our second presenter, Academician Gregorio, to deliver his talk, our second panelist.
Thank you very much, Karen, and good pleasant day to all of you. What's the weather today? Or we asked also, what's for lunch today? So that's the normal greetings that we are expecting in our country and even globally. So climate change and food security are so relevant now. So I will share my slide now. I want to make a title of this about climate change and food security. I will have a title like, I'll say food on an increasingly hot plate. So what happened to our food if the plate is too hot now because of climate change? Okay, I'll go to my next slide. I may say, just to have a background, that climate change excludes no one. So everyone is affected of climate change. So this is in all stages of life, in all ranking in life. So climate change, this is the changing of weather patterns, rising of sea levels, extreme weather events, we are expecting now that affects the economies and even the lives around the globe. And this also directly affects our food security, of course, and it threatens the availability, access, utilization, and stability of our food supply. And since everyone goes hungry and we would need to have a safe and nutritious food, and we must all be a part of the urgent action to combat climate change and manage its impact. So what action, I'll go to my next slide. What actions shall we do? So I propose that there should be transformation in our food systems, and that is from a farmer that is a producer only. We want to convert a farmer into a trans farmer. I call it the trans farming. By rethinking our food security, if we do some transformation in our food system, we have to rethink what is food security. Actually, our experience with climate change for the previous years, and as we are aware of climate change, and now the COVID-19 highlights the importance of how we define food security, which in turn becomes the basis of how we design action to achieve transformation in our food systems. So as a consumer and youth, we are now becoming more aware about the linkage between what we have in our plates and with the quality and quantity of farm production. Now, the general public also appreciate the value of agriculture or the value of our food system. Actually, agriculture sector could then capitalize on this increasing support to identify several investments necessary for strengthening the agriculture systems or the food system. So this is the best time for us to shout that we need really to invest more in our food system, which includes the environment, the people, the profit, and this is, we should work them together. The second, after rethinking food security, we should have this sowing of our curiosity. This is for the youth. We have to show our crazy ideas. We have to impart our crazy ideas. Maybe this will work. So seeing food security as a coordination problem, we should use this experience with climate change and COVID-19 to rethink how we pursue food production and consumption and work towards a transformative change in the agriculture systems that is sustainable, that is inclusive, everyone should be there, and resilient, and of course, sustainable, as I mentioned. This, there is also a need to support for more the linkage between the academe, the students, the faculty, the universities, to the industries, and to the government, to the people, to the farmers. So we have to have this model, the academe, I call it the academe industry government interconnectivity model, which is very critical to operationalize the interconnectivity between and among the nodes of the value chains. This academic industry government interconnectivity model could also highlight the linkage between the rural farming systems and the urban consumers patterns. So we have to link these two, which is very important, and vice versa. We have to encourage all sectors participation, particularly the youth and the women, through a number of well-thought incentives. So how would we incentivize the youth? How we incentivize the women to participate for social safety net system that will be instrumental to sustain these efforts. So I'll just put here my last few slides. I just put my key points here that we have to contend with the climate change. Climate change will be there in our food systems. And transforming rice farmer to be more resilient to climate change, we need more science and technology enabling to make our farms to be trans farms. We call it trans farmers, then we make our farm to be transformed. And if you want to go to the deals with this, maybe have another seminar for this. Climate change ready crop varieties. This is very near my heart. We have to develop the climate change ready varieties. These varieties which I'm a scientist working on this one, we have to outsmart climate change by developing these kinds of varieties that would adapt to climate change. We must have a good quality seeds and varieties and hybrids. We have to mechanize. We have to capitalize on these disruptive events that we have now, especially digitalizing farming and mechanization, smart fertilization. We have to have this conservation agriculture. We have to have a nutritional revolution in our farming. So we have to put back the nutrition to our soil. Water-saving technologies. I am emphasizing the drip irrigation, which is very applicable now. We need only few waters if we use drip irrigation. Agriculture must be treated as a business and industry. And our farmers must be transformed to become trans farmers. And my next slide, I will just emphasize also that climate change in agriculture is not just a problem. It's the driver also. We look at it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us students, young people, as a driver for research and business. Think of business that we could capitalize on this one. What research we could do. So for those who are scientists, researchers, think this as an opportunity to do research. Be ready also for the ASEAN integration because it might be, everyone will be involved here. It is also an opportunity. We need each other to work together. Interconnectivity means that we have to start working together from the very start. So the youth should be at the very start of planning to make this happen. Our problem is so critical now that we don't need single heroes. We need 2 or 3 heroes. That's why we don't need only a Superman. We don't need an Iron Man only because we need the whole gang of the Avengers. We have to assemble the Justice League. We need those people, a team of people to work together because the problem is not for one, it's for everyone. So youth are our powerhouse to make this as our powerhouse to make things happen. That is to make our food system sustainable. It may mean that you have to start from your own backyard. You have to look at how you could apply circular economy, waste segregation. You start from your backyard. Are you segregating your waste? Are you starting to do composting? Are you planting a little bit to make our lifestyle less in respect to an environment? As I mentioned, like youth, you have to be aware that you have to understand the less processed your food is, the beautiful it will be, less effect on the environment, it's more healthy. That's why I'm even advocating breastfeeding is one most single investment that we should implement from the youth, from the young generation up to now, because this is environmentally friendly, the best investment for health for human being and health for the environment. So in my last slide, I just want to say that at the ground level, there are many things, especially as young people, that we can do. Climate change has increased level of uncertainty about our future. We have to act now or even use our crazy ideas, like sowing the seed for curiosity with us. Just like when I was young, I usually do research on using solar dryer for agricultural products. I usually have the idea of using refrigeration. I use refrigeration system using the cooling effect. It is good that young people are increasingly aware of the challenges and the risks presented by the climate crisis, an opportunity to achieve sustainable development brought by a solution to climate change. So, however, you or we young people are not just the victims, but you can also, or we can also carry a lot of potential in carrying out and accelerating climate action. You possess the massive power to advocate for change and to hold decision makers accountable. So you have to organize and make them accountable if ever, because this is your generation. So, but as I mentioned, we have to be heroes now, and for our food security. I think that's my last slide. Thank you. As the one of our national scientists before said, be the heroes we never were, and do it now. Thank you very much. Back to you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Professor Gregorio. I'd like to call in Dr. Estuar for her reaction.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning to everyone. Thank you, Dr. Glenn, for the very nice presentation and presenting very good points. Your discussion on the relevance of climate change and food security provides a painful truth that we cannot function and survive without food. Oftentimes, sadly though, more than an ounce of truth, until we feel the threat, until we feel that there is no more food on the table, that is the only time we take action. And I'm very, very thankful to NAST for creating environments that will allow research to reach the public. The purpose of research is to understand and think ahead and plan or prepare. And as a measure of success of research, it is successful if it reaches the ordinary person. Dr. Glenn provides us with a few points to ponder about food security and climate change. That first, climate change influences food security in relation to availability. Therefore, for food to be secure, it should be accessible by a lot of people. It should not be put to waste, meaning we should maximize and optimize on the utilization of these technologies, and that it should be stable and therefore should be sustainable. But how do we transform? How do we transform, as he nicely puts it? How do we transform? What technologies will facilitate the transforming, especially for the youth? The youth who are very, very curious about things, who talk more and therefore we should provide them with ways to act more. Inclusivity means that everyone gains and everyone should have access. So that's one way of looking at transforming, to make sure that when we provide solutions, it is inclusive. It is not only for the few, but for the many. Interconnectivity is also a reason to make sure that the ecosystem is sustained or it works. Connection is important because we cannot continue to compartmentalize. No? We cannot be just single heroes, as Dr. Glenn said. No? We should not compartmentalize, but we should understand the different stakeholders that are part of the ecosystem, which includes us as citizens. And therefore, we should know our roles and make sure that the ecosystem survives climate change. Ang problema ng isa is problema ng lahat. No? So we have to make sure that we all understand that. No? For sustainability, how do we maintain it and how do we scale? And this is where the business aspect comes in. No? So the research should not remain in the ivory tower, should not remain in publications, but should be sustained. No? So when we implement this in action, there should be a way to maintain how we do things and how we propose to do things. No? So the youth should learn how to do business and how to do business well. Let me end with 2 points. No? The way to address the effect of climate change and food security is to change the way we look at things. No? Systems thinking allows us to understand the role of each agency, each actor in the ecosystem. We need to connect all the stakeholders. We need to provide access to the sources of information that we need to understand each other and to coordinate and to make decisions. We also need to rethink how we understand farming, how we transform. No? How do we transform our youth to be pro-farming? Perhaps set up home farm laboratories, maybe create more accessible and inclusive transforming courses, maybe learn more about the business side, no? How to create an ecosystem, an e-commerce platform perhaps that will allow from farm to table. be more accessible to everyone. Let us take advantage of this opportunity for change. Let us engage our youth to help us rethink the way we do science in food security. And like what Dr. Glenn said, no, let us outsmart climate change for food security. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Estuar. Some main points, I like what you said about outsmarting climate change, but also that research is successful only if it reaches the ordinary person. I'd like to call in now Dr. Amara, our third panelist this morning.
Good morning. I would like to share my screen. Good morning, and thank you, Karen. And I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this forum. I will be presenting a short change and nutrition. So the objectives of my presentation are to discuss how environmental stressors and climate change influence nutrition primarily through changes in our gut microbiota, and how nutrition can be used to mitigate the stress inflicted by the environment and by climate change. So as a brief background, approximately 100 trillion microorganisms exist in our gastrointestinal tract, and these are mostly bacteria, but there's also viruses, fungi, and protozoa. 90% of these bacteria belong to 4 phyla, and these microorganisms have a collective genome which is 150-fold greater than the human genome. Thus, this microbiome is considered a virtual organ of the body. Now, we have a mutually beneficial or commensalistic relationship with the microbes in our body. These microbes inactivate toxins and break down indigestible nutrients. They control the overgrowth of pathogens or disease-causing bacteria. They assist in the development of the human anatomy and the proper functioning of immune cells. Overall, they carry out enzymatic reactions and produce metabolites which replace many functions of the host, consequently influencing the person's fitness and health. So this slide shows the gut-intestinal barrier. Our intestinal tract is protected by epithelial cells which have tight junctions, and these act as a barrier to prevent the entry of undesirable intestinal contents such as pathogens and toxins into the bloodstream. These cells have a microbial layer on top which interact with the host immune system. Under healthy conditions, or the condition of gut homeostasis, this microbial layer is dominated by beneficial microorganisms which keep the intestinal barrier intact to maintain health. However, under unhealthy conditions or gut dysbiosis, this layer is dominated by pathogenic microbes which disrupt the integrity of the intestinal barrier, resulting in the translocation of pathogens and toxins from the intestine into the general circulation, leading to a dysregulated immune response, metabolic endotoxemia, and inflammation, which lead to the development of chronic diseases. So what are the research findings on the effect of climate change on gut microbiota? The paper showed that warming temperatures promoted gut dysbiosis among tadpoles mediated through interactions with environmental bacteria, resulting in stunted tadpole growth. Tadpole growth was more strongly associated with the effects of warming on gut dysbiosis rather than with the effects of warming on food resources. And in this study among humans, which examined the impact of a pig farm and gut microbiome of veterinary students, showed that after 3 months of exposure in the farm, students' gut microbiota showed an increase in potentially pathogenic taxa and antimicrobial resistance genes. The antimicrobial resistance genes were similar to those found in the farm environmental samples, confirming that acute changes in a human's living environment can shape the gut microbiota, and the changes in gut microbiota correlate with environmental exposure. So unhealthy diet, as Dr. Gregorio has mentioned earlier, is a factor that contributes to gut dysbiosis. An example is the Western diet, characterized by high sugar and high fat. High intake of sugars increases the abundance of proteobacteria, while simultaneously decreasing the abundance of results in increased pro-inflammatory interactions and a decreased capacity to regulate the epithelial integrity, promoting metabolic endotoxemia, which is commonly found in obese animals and humans. So there's a recent paper by D. Ramsey highlighting the ability of gut microbes to evolve with the changing environment. Microbes can adapt genetically to altered conditions in our gut, such as sugar that is consumed. So the first route for adaptation is by altering the transcription of certain metabolic and transport proteins. This is followed by compositional changes, which in turn lead to genetic adaptation and the emergence of different strains which can coexist with the original bacterial population. And these strains may produce metabolites that disrupt the integrity of the intestinal barrier, resulting in the translocation of pathogens and the production of inflammatory compounds that adversely affect health. An example of this is the emergence of hypervirulent strains of Clostridium difficile, following the introduction of trehalose as a food additive in the global food market. Studies show that these strains are able to utilize low amounts of trehalose, which result in their increased virulence. So other types of unhealthy diet patterns that lead to gut dysbiosis are the use of red meat with preservatives and high protein, high fat animal-based diets. So this recent study by FNRI showed that a high intake of meat and sweetened beverages is associated with greater risk for diabetes and cardiovascular disease in the Philippine population. And it is now recognized that gut microbial dysbiosis is associated with a number of diseases and may also be associated with COVID-19 as well. So our diet influences both our physical health, but also not only physical health, but also the environment. For example, artificial sweeteners are not degraded by gut bacteria and are excreted unchanged. These sweeteners are considered environmental contaminants due to their persistence in aquatic environments and resistance to wastewater treatment. Examples are acesulfame and sucralose, which are widely used in processed foods, and there is increasing recognition that these chemicals impact the ecosystem and will have long-term environmental consequences that still need to be studied. So a healthy diet comprising increased levels of dietary fiber from natural foods is the preferred substrate of our common cell bacteria. These bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids through fermentation, and these short-chain fatty acids interact with the host immune system to reduce inflammation, protect against pathogen infiltration, and maintain the integrity of the intestinal barrier. So, in conclusion, this recent paper from the British Medical Journal states that gut microbiota influence many areas of human health, targeting the gut microbiome with probiotics or dietary fiber benefits human health. Drugs, food ingredients, antibiotics, and pesticides could have adverse effects on our microbiota. Microbiota should be considered a key aspect in nutrition, and the medical community should adopt their education and public health messages to take this into consideration, and fiber consumption is associated with beneficial health effects. Action points for citizens to maintain health in the face of environmental stress include increasing the intake of fresh vegetables and fruits, pulses, legumes, and seeds, whole grains, because these provide the substrate for our beneficial microbes to produce short-chain fatty acids, which maintain the integrity of the gut barrier and improve immune function. Reducing the intake of sugar, artificial sweeteners, sugar-sweetened and processed foods, as these foods contain ingredients which favor the abundance of pathogenic microbes that disrupt the integrity of our gut barrier and reduce immune resistance. And finally, as the Brazilian dietary guidelines recommend, and as Dr. Gregorio has recommended, make natural and minimally processed foods the basis of our diet. Because if we take care of our gut microbes, our microbes will take care of us. So that ends my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amara. I have to say that presentation spoke very closely to my heart. I'd like to invite now Dr. Zamora to give her reaction to Dr. Amara's presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to the organizers for this invitation and to Dr. Amara and the other speakers for your very stimulating presentations. So when I first heard about climate change and nutrition as the topic I would react on, I didn't think it would be correlated with my specialty, which is rheumatology. But lo and behold, especially for Dr. Amara's presentation, she zoned in on a quite impactful way. Climate change has been affecting mankind, and this is through the human gut microbiome, which has been discussed more often in our medical conferences in the recent years. And this is because of its newfound association with not just the diseases she mentioned, obesity and many others, but also with autoimmune diseases, which is one of the most common, or which are one of the most common yet under or misdiagnosed conditions affecting the population. And many studies have been done and are underway to help manage patients with altered gut microbes, or as possibly primary prevention. So if we can stop climate change, or at least retard it or slow it down, then maybe our health system will really improve for the better. And for more relevance in the present time is climate change's association with COVID-19, as disturbances in the gut microbiota possibly exacerbates the severity of the cytokine storm. If you've heard of that phrase, I'm sure you've heard of that phrase if you've had relatives who developed COVID, for which we are called on when managing these patients with severe or critical COVID exhibiting signs of this storm. And this opens up very exciting avenues for us to be able to help ourselves have a better chance at surviving not just this pandemic, but the potential catastrophe of climate change if we do not do something about it. And really, the challenge now is what we can do. Our speakers have given us action points as citizens of the Philippines and of the world. And your presentations are an eye-opener for me in many ways. And your action points include sustainable food sources, eating less meat, shifting to food that would leave lesser carbon footprint. So this artificial sweetener focus is also quite an eye-opener, because as a person who tries to lessen her sugar intake, I have been, eating a lot of food with artificial sweeteners, and I'm sure a lot of you in the audience have been doing so. But it's really now the time to do something about this before we are really affected in ways that are not reversible anymore. So back to you, Karen. Thank you very much for this floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zamora, for that. And now we are open to our forum. And before I start, I'd like to read first the questions that have been put on our chat box. Okay. So everybody, you can also choose the panelist or even the reactor if there's a specific question you want them to answer. But let me start with this. From Desiree Guwach, what are your recommendations for communities suffering the dumping of hospital waste, especially on waterways as reported in the news? Dr. Cabral, can you take this? Okay. Is Dr. Cabral still with us? All right. Let me
Yes,
move.
I'm here.
Go ahead, madam.
Sorry.
Yes, it's all right.
Well, hospital wastes are really a big problem, particularly now when there has been an increase in the use of plastics and plastic-derived materials for personal protective equipments. And we should really segregate all of these plastic waste materials coming from hospitals and everywhere else so that they do not pollute the ecosystem permanently. As you know, the lifespan of plastic is hundreds of years. So if we keep using them, don't reuse, don't recycle, and avoid using them, then the environment is going to be really polluted. There are many laws on how to dispose of hospital and other medical wastes. And hospitals, medical professionals, all healthcare workers, including the citizenry, must be aware of how to properly dispose of medical waste and hospital waste. And if we see a hospital not disposing of their waste properly, we should call them out so that they don't repeat what they've been doing badly for the last, I don't know how long a time. There are many organizations that do audits of hospital waste management, and hospitals can do well to patronize these particular institutions and learn from them how to take care of wastes coming from their medical use.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cabral. Let's now move on specifically to the effects of climate change to the everyday Filipino. Given that this is an urgent concern, is one must wonder if it's a public health emergency. As Dr. Cabral mentioned, why isn't the world acting more urgently regarding this? Let's start first with the farmers, all right? Professor Gregorio, ang mga tanong ko dito, unang-una, no, given that you said climate change is here to stay, ano po ang dapat gawin sa Pilipinas, number one, to make our farmers more resilient to climate change, to make sure that the food we are eating is healthy? And can you explain what trans farming is?
Yeah.
And can you make it in layman's terms that it's very practical to understand?
Yeah. Okay. I want to emphasize about trans farmers. I want what really transformation is a transformative farmer, or from farmer to entrepreneur, to look at farming. They will sell it. You have to make it a businessman. And using the different technologies available now, digital farming, using other innovative technologies and digital farming and mechanization, you use all those things to make a farmer businessman na siya. Then he has also technology, then that's the trans farmer. That's my vision. That will make our youth more attractive to farm, because it's a business and it's a high tech. That's why I call the next generation the trans farmer, and he has the trans farm. Okay, and the next question is more on how you will be adaptable. We should
Dr. Gregorio, I was going to ask you, I think we're having a problem with your internet. Would you want to log in again or restart your internet? And I'll have Dr. I'll have Dr. Escobar just continue this thought. Dr. Escobar, perhaps you can compare it to the Philippines setting. Why hasn't the Philippines really improved in its farming techniques, given that climate change is here to stay and considering our Southeast Asian neighbors? Let's not go far, like Vietnam has become very successful in modernizing farming techniques.
Okay, when you talk about technology, Karen, there are different aspects of technology. So food technology and farming technology. So the science that looks at the variety of crops, for example, and what fits our country's climate, is, I think, one of the expertise of Dr. Glenn, in farming talaga. But I think moving forward,
Yes.
aside from just studying about these things, we should maximize on current technologies that we have that will extend and expand our understanding of farming. So ito na nga yung sinasabi natin na, for example, ICT, our smartphones can actually be used to provide us with content about products and goods para diretso na from farm to table. Konti na lang yung dinadaanan ng food, and then we will maximize also on the capability of our farmers to become businessmen, because we can provide them also with simple tools that will allow them to transact directly with the consumers. So maganda po yung path na sinabi ni Dr. Glenn na transform the way we look at farming. So hindi na yung traditional. We have provided a lot of solutions already on the science of farming, but I think we should maximize on technologies that are just at the tip of our hands. So that's digitization of a lot of things, connecting us as consumers and as connecting us to the producers, and then providing a good ecosystem for communication and understanding each other. Yeah.
Okay, Professor Gregorio is back, and perhaps you can also take this question from Roel Suralta. How can we integrate farmers who had limited understanding of climate change and technological options to make them really productive? Perhaps you can incorporate that question with your whole thought.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So I think that's more related. I'm okay now, Karen. Is my
yes, pretty good.
Okay, I have to make slow now. Okay, that's a good question from Roel Soralta, and I think that's related to the general question you asked me a while ago. So if you want to make farmers, let them be aware of the climate change. Don't wala tayo sa denial stage. We have to say that the climate change is here because we know the temperature is rising, mas mainit ngayon, the seawater rise. The seawater level is high now. Most of our farms now, the seawater is going back to the river. Minsan naging maalat na ang ating palayan because of that one and over extraction of water. Then what I propose is we must have some to make the technology like smart seeds. We have climate change ready seeds now, as I mentioned when we have a talk before, Karen. These are available, but ang mga farmers hindi pa sila. We need farmer heroes. We have to have a farmer heroes to start this one. Once they see, to see is to believe. So once they see that it's working, then it will just spread like fire. So wag natin i-implement it, oversell sa kanila. We'll just select several farmers to start it with even for field rice to start it. Then after that, everyone will follow. So that's a smart way of doing it. So at the same time, we have to have an example of youth farmers. These are the trans farmers that we have a transform with transformers using the new technologies and business-minded. And I think that will be an attraction. In my small ways, I'm doing it. I converted some part of my farm into a vegetable, from a rice farm to a vegetable farm. I planted 10 different kinds of vegetable and everyone is looking, pwede pala.
Yes.
Maganda pala. Cute pala. Then everyone is looking. Then they will start following you. So, but the most important is to link them to the market because as I mentioned, there's a related question din doon. If you want, hindi mo malink sa market, baka mabulukan ka rin kasi masarap umani ng maraming gulay, but ang market ang improvement, ang dapat natin bantayan. Thank you.
And let's not go far. Our very own president of Towns, Ces Drelon, has already become a farmer herself, who is doing farm to table in her life practice. But very quickly, Professor Gregorio, would you say there's a lack of innovation in how the Philippines is approaching farming? And when I mean that is in terms of strategy. Yes, the money is there, but then are we trapped in old ways of thinking on where to spend the money?
Yeah, actually, I may say that it's more on the money is there, technology is there, is how to implement it. Because I may say it's very difficult. If I'm with the government, then it's very difficult to implement because just releasing the money, giving the loan to the farmer takes a long time. So 5-6 na lang ako kasi available na mamaya, mag-fertilize ako, wala pang one. Takes a long time, it takes 7 years. That's my experience. I have a startup business and I tap the government. Mahirap.
Okay.
So those are the problem. The money is there, but how to implement it. So I want the NGOs, I want the industry. That's why I say academic, industry, government into productivity. The industry should come in to make this happen.
Okay. All right. Let me move first now to the effects of climate change to our physical well-being. Dr. Gudran said that we may not know it, but technically climate change also plays a role in the respiratory diseases, heat-related diseases. The heat is quite obvious, no? Professor Gudran, but even on our mental health. Can you expound on that? And is there proof? How does climate change actually affect
Okay, thank you for that
of
question.
our
Sarah.
mental well-being? Yeah. How does that connect? Some might ask.
Okay, so climate change causes extreme weather events, for example, no? And then extreme weather events look at Yolanda, no? Example natin is Yolanda. If you are exposed to extreme events, namatayan ka, nadurog yung paligid mo, basag, nawalan ka ng bahay, nawalan ka ng livelihood, nawala lahat ng kamag-anak mo, syempre that has an effect to your mental health, diba? So indirectly, yung effect ng climate change sa extreme weather will cause you mental health issues. Pero yung climate change mismo na magkakos sa'yo ng mental health issues, siguro pag nag-suffer ka lang dahil nahirapan ka dahil sobrang init, no? Pero yung traumatic effect, no nakita mo sa paligid mo na wala lahat ng ari-arian mo, that has a more severe impact to your mental health actually.
Okay. So what you're saying actually, Professor, it's the effect, it's the after effect of the effects of climate change
sa ating environment, and that change in the environment affects you, cause you suffering, cause you grief, that affects your mental health.
Okay. We are said to have so many laws when it comes to the environment. In fact, the United Nations has lauded the Philippines. But do you believe we are practicing them in a way that actually helps and improves the well-being of people? And what do we need to do moving forward?
To answer that question frankly, no? I know na isa tayo sa mga bansa na marami talaga tayong batas. Unfortunately, no, magaling tayong gumawa ng batas pero mukhang hindi naman alam ng community lahat ng batas na ito. So implementation, I don't think na-implement natin, which is sad, no? Nangunguna tayo sa mga batas pero hindi natin siya na-implement, no? Siguro, I think we should try to do, no? Gawin natin, implement natin yung mga leaders natin, i-promote talaga natin yung mga batas which is there actually to serve the community, to improve the community, hindi lang yung self-interest, di ba? Usually ang motivating factor kaya mo ipopromote yung isang batas is selfish eh. Pero the laws are there to improve the community. So it should not be selfish, it should be public service, no? So I think we should be public service oriented, and we should apply the laws that would improve everyone in the community.
Okay. Would you like to add to that, Also, anybody among the panelists, would you like to comment on that? Perhaps Dr. Zamora can. I mean, I know you see patients, Geraldine, and clearly, have you seen practical effects of climate change in terms of respiratory diseases and mental health, and what can be done?
Okay. I was out for several seconds prior to
Sure.
If this is the question that you are asking from me. Is it more of the respiratory system? Yes.
Yes.
Actually, this is quite new to me. No? As I mentioned earlier, when I was invited to react, my initial reaction was, I don't know anything about it, and it's not really something I am an expert of. But I'm really happy to have been invited because it opened up my eyes.
Yes.
It opened I now know that the little things I've been doing are impacting the world, and I can do other things, such as, for example, simply by improving my diet or not leaving my chargers or plugging plug chargers or leaving them unplugged. It would be helpful. And so in medicine, the microbiome is not just the only parang source of the problems that is affected by climate change, but also in general, what Dr. Cabral has mentioned, the waste products that have been generated, especially now during the pandemic, and especially the immune system. When climate change is affecting nutrition and nutrition is being decreased because of crops dying and yung parang making food available faster.
Okay.
When they see that chickens now grow or are being sold in a month compared to before, I think it takes about 6 months for chickens to naturally grow and be palatable or to be kumbaga to be served. When nutrition goes down, then it affects. These are connections that I just realized because of this conference, and hopefully more of our youth will be enlightened on these effects that we can actually do ourselves. We can actually help prevent ourselves.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Zamora. A lot of the questions actually in our chat box have to do with personal health. And of course, I understand why. And I'd like to share with all of you, Dr. Amara's presentation also was such an eye-opener. It's refreshing to see a doctor actually speaking about this. When my son was diagnosed with autism, David Cesas met him at 3 or 3.5 years old. The first doctor who diagnosed him said there's nothing that can be done. There are doctors that are not believers that food actually has a factor in autoimmune disorders. They're not believers that the gut actually plays a role in how mental health affects your body, or how even how neurologically you're affected by your gut. So Dr. Amara's presentation was, I think this has been going on for many years, Dr. Amara, in Europe and in the US, and it's very sad that we're just catching up now in the Philippines. Don't you agree?
Yes, actually, that was way back in 2010 or 2008 that I learned about it. Yeah, we've been quite late in adopting the concepts, and the science has moved forward. It's associated with the ability to do gene sequencing of our gut microbes, which is called metagenomics. So the advances in these molecular biology techniques have allowed the knowledge in health to move forward. And among the doctors in the US are the ones that are moving this forward because of their advanced equipment, advanced scientific methods, which we still need to procure for our own country.
Yes. So to connect this now to climate change, and any of you can contribute, Dr. Gregorio specifically, given that climate change is there to stay, what must be done to plant better food so that Filipinos, in effect, eat cleaner, farm to table in a way that they can afford, and stop or change the habit or mindset of needing to buy or believing they need to buy food from the supermarkets that's essentially canned. So let's start with that. Perhaps you can share, all of you, like Dr. Gregorio, Dr. Estuar, you can all pitch in. So how do we move to this new pathway of climate change exists? So how do we now make better food, and also that transforms to better guts for Filipinos and make them healthier?
Yeah, I think that's a very, I may call it Miss Universe question, but that's very important for all of us. Actually, I always say at the end of my talk is what's important is what's now in your plate. You have to look at your plate you're doing. Start with yourself, your family, your community. So look at your plate, how much processed food you are eating, how colorful is your food? Because I always say the most colorful, the rule of my time is you don't need to be a biochemist, but the more colorful your food is, the more helpful it is. So if you look at your food, you have to less processed food, it's more healthy and it's more environmental friendly. I will even go up to the level of breastfeeding. Just as simple as breastfeeding, it will lessen the use of your formula milk. It is very good for the environment. You don't need to raise a lot of livestock to produce milk, less processing, and it's good for the human. It's good for the environment, the most environmentally friendly, and it will be good for the economy. So those are the
but Professor, can the Philippines achieve food security? For example, if it does not use, let's say, mass-made chemicals or fertilizers to actually preserve vegetables that are being grown or palay that's being grown.
Yeah, we have to. It has been decades already, centuries of doing those very using of inorganic fertilizers. So we have to start slowly on transforming the farmers. That's I always say transforms to make it. We have to go back to conservation agriculture, to this regenerative agriculture to make put the soil health of the soil back, because we have now technologies in doing it. So those are just examples to make it. I always look at in the three aspects: the profit, the people, and the planet, the environment. We always look at those in those sides to make this happen. It's a long story, but yes, we could do it because we have it's the political will. We have to encourage, we have to incentivize the people, the youth, the farmer who will be using this natural farming. I may not advocate purely organic farming. You have a small niche for that one, but natural to make us sustainable. At least that's more sustainable.
Okay, so Dr. Amara, very quickly, something practical for those tuned in on Facebook. How will they clean their gut? So here they are, they've watched your presentation and could be in a state of panic, right? You have already Senator Zaviri's office wanting your presentation because of what you've said about artificial sweeteners. But then let's be practical. So you have a viewer now on Facebook. How will they clean their gut? And how do they know their gut is healthy? What are the signs?
Well, if you have a healthy gut, it will show in your skin, your hair, the signs of good health. You don't have pains and aches, those physical ailments. I mean, you can do your normal activities. And for the children, I think the Food and Nutrition National Nutrition Survey, there's unpublished data showing that over time, the intake of sugar and confectionaries among the adult age group has increased from 2008 to 2013. So the sweetened food products that showed a significant increase in consumption were these confectionery, baked products, and the sugar-sweetened beverages. And I think things like the milk tea, they contribute a lot to sugar intake, because my students conducted some kind of a survey, just a qualitative research survey, and now they're saying the the overweight subject said, oh, we need it to pass away the time, to remove our boredom, to remove our stress. So there are things that are externally motivated that the government also or the families have to address or something, and the parents also have to be educated, because the parents in the first place are the ones who buy the cakes, the sweet biscuits, the sweet drinks, everything sweet.
Okay.
So that's how you can clean your gut, remove all those sweet, just drink milk, unsweetened milk, drink water, do exercise, eat vegetables.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about the role of rice. I mean, this could be controversial in this forum. We know that when a senator said that Filipinos are eating too much rice, she got lambasted, but some health experts have told me we really are eating too much rice. So I wanted to ask you too, because our rice output is also affected by climate change, but are we eating too much rice, Dr. Amara?
Probably the refined rice. The Food and Nutrition Institute is promoting the use of the brown rice and the colored rices, which have polyphenolic compounds that are protective and have lower glycemic index. So that is one way that the government can address, instead of the refined processed.
Correct.
Use less processed.
Is that more resilient to climate change too, that particular seed or grain?
Oh, that I cannot say. I have to ask Dr. Gregorio if that's more.
Yeah. And Dr. Estuar, please feel free. Go ahead.
Okay, maybe to contribute, no, I think information is the key, no, to a lot of these things, no, and our technologies now will allow us, no, to be given the right kind of information. So, for example, how do we balance all these things? No, Karen, your question is, if we follow this path, baka naman mabulok yung mga pagkain, ano, masayang. But if we are able to collect this information and model it, no, we will know how to optimize yung pag-transfer ng food from farm to table, no? That's why we really need to have a systems thinking approach, no? We should have a one-stop shop, a portal, for example, of all these things. We know what we can consume based on our health, for example. So in personal information integrated with science information, integrated with business information. It's not something complex, no? We have proven that we are able to create these platforms, no, for monitoring COVID, and I think we should extend it already, no, to include climate change and food security as part of this ecosystem of technology. So I think information, make sure that information is accessible, and then if you and then provide alternatives, no. So kung bawal ang sweets, ano yung pwede at saan natin siya makukuha, no? Yung mga ganon para kompleto yung information. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else wanted to react? Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead quickly.
Actually, the question on rice is very controversial. I have been with the rice research for the longest time. But my take here is really, it's not the rice itself, but what is with your rice? I think that will be our question. Ano ba ang rice? Kasi if you see the Asian, we are eating rice for the whole generation. Pero slim sila, everyone is wala pang diabetes. No,
but Filipinos, Professor, are eating 3 cups of rice, huh?
Yeah, but it's not what you're eating, what's with you're eating with rice also. Kasi pag rice naman lahat, ay that's masama naman. It's a healthy diet. I always say, the more colorful your food is, the more healthy it is. Okay. Healthful it is. Okay. And I agree with Dr. Amara that it's already education. We have to educate the people of what we eat. Brown rice, even from the younger generation, the youngest and the youth must start eating variable sources of staple.
Yeah, there are varying questions now from our chat box, and I think I should also answer them. They may not be interconnected, but let's just, anybody feel free if you have something to contribute. Juan Gabriel Ceballos says, are there any recommendations for fisheries, especially fishermen? Often they are also neglected and climate change affects them also. And then add to the West Philippine Sea issue now. But Professor Gregorio, would this be under your coverage, your jurisdiction?
Yeah, a little bit. So what we are, thank you. for that one. What we're doing at CIRCA, this is Southeast Asian Regional Center for Graduate Study and Research in Agriculture. We're also looking at our fisher folks, because this is very important. We have our food, actually food from the sea is less, more environmental friendly because we are not raising them, less gas emission. But what I'm saying is we have to have new technologies, like just as simple as planting mangrove, just as simple as fishing holidays, how to systematize this one, to practicalize this one, to make the farmer feel that if they have the fish has holidays, they will grow big and they will produce more, and they will profit from that. And what we're developing
we're
now
not practicing that now, sir. That's not
we are
being
practicing a
practiced
little, but there's
Okay.
a lot of protest about that one. But they should see the long-term effect of this one. Now they are harvesting good fish because of those fish holidays that we are creating, and we are doing a study on the impact of that one. We are developing also cold chain for the farmers, refrigeration for the farmers, because this is really important, especially for the sardines fisher folks. Thank you.
Okay. Tanong po ng University of the Philippines, isang kolehiyo po, hindi ko nabuksan ng buo. Sana pagtuunan na rin ang epekto ng sobrang laking populasyon sa food security, environmental degradation, and overall health delivery system, among others. So that's more of a comment. Here is John Junas. My question is, what is the most important thing to do to protect the environment now? I guess given that there's climate change, and despite the current threat of the pandemic, I don't have time to think in my mind that climate change is real. Because right now I'm experiencing stress, anxiety, and depression. That's very good on what is happening around me. What to do first, what to do next, what to do tomorrow, but I didn't even realize that we set aside in taking good care of the environment. So why don't you take that, Professor Gudran? Dr.
Yes,
Gudran, what's the most important thing to do to protect the environment? Something be specific, concrete, simple that an ordinary Filipino can act on.
Thank you, Karen. No? Actually, this example of what he's saying, it affects his, it causes him stress, anxiety, and depression. That is the mental health effect of the crisis currently happening in our environment, di ba? And which could also be linked to climate change. Now, ano yung pwede natin gawin individually? Since climate change ang pinag-uusapan natin, again, ang causes niya is yung excessive carbon emission na nagtatrap ng heat. No, what we can do is to lessen the carbon emissions. No, like for example, sinagot ko na kanina, recycling or ano pa ba? Decrease combustion, di ba?
Pero ang problema, tanong ko nga sa inyo, sir, magre-recycle ako sa bahay ko. Susunduin ang basurero. Hindi naman nila i-recycle.
That's a problem.
Nila. So ito,
yun
kung
ang problema.
nag-recycle sa bahay, pero paglabas nun, sinasama-sama rin po.
Yes, exactly. That's a problem, no? So, kasi, ang kailangan natin gawin is dapat lahat tayo into it eh. Lahat tayo dedicated to do this. Dedicated ako, pwede ako maging example, pero yung kapitbahay ko, yung iba dyan, hindi dedicated, everything will fail. Kaya nakaka-frustrate. Diba? So, sino ba ang makakapag-lead sa atin dito? Actually, yung government eh. Dapat yung government is public service oriented talaga to pursue what is good for everyone. Diba? Not what is good for my partido lang. Kumbaga, public service talaga ang gawin natin. No? Ang maganda example dyan is the government talaga to lead it.
Parang malalim yan Yung
malalim.
sir, Okay, Dr. Estuar, would you have a suggestion, Dr. Zamora, to later on? What can the ordinary Filipino do? Tanong nga ito ng isa nating viewer. An environment, something to protect the environment na kaya niya.
Yes, no, I think our youth are more knowledgeable about this, no, because karamihan talaga sa kanila are very conscious about this, no. They want a better world, so they are more conscious. And I think the practice that I do at home is inspired by my daughters, no. So what do they do, and what have we been doing for maybe the past 3 years now? No, talagang nagre-recycle kami, as in we segregate. We try not to purchase things that will allow us to throw away so many things.
You reuse.
So we reuse, we segregate cardboards, papers separated from plastics. We avoid buying in stores that provide more of this waste, and then we look for areas where we can exchange this, no, for goods, no. So meron na pong mga ganyan ngayon, baka lang hindi aware, no. So hindi lang natin aantayin yung basurero. Actually, there are groups already that collect this and make use of these different types of waste, and then they reuse it. So marami po yan sa ating mga Instagram and Facebook, no. So yun po yung ginagawa namin, and that we have less waste now at home. And I think if a lot of people do that, then it's gonna be a big change in our environment.
Okay, Dr. Amara, would you have a suggestion?
Reduction of meat, animal meat is one, because if you raise, according to the literature, the carbon emissions from animals is higher than that from plants. So, pero konti lang ang reduction, especially for children, kasi otherwise we have the problem of protein, energy, malnutrition, and the reduced growth. So, not excessive. The recommendation of 1 to 2 exchanges, depending on the body weight, 30 grams, depending on the body weight of the person. And yeah, the waste segregation is one, and the unprocessed foods would be another, because the manufacturing process itself is a carbon emitter. So
yes,
so that's about it.
I think, Dr. Amara, you're saying something powerful, that if you can retrain Filipinos, actually, that they would feel that it's even they tend to think na parang, oh, it's luxury pag nagbukas ka ng canned goods, right? Parang pag bumili ka sa supermarket ng nakahanda na, mas ano yon, bonus. But it's a retraining really na, no. Kapag nagtanim ka ng malunggay, niluto mo, yun ang luxury.
Yeah.
Yun ang
it's a paradigm shift. Yeah, it's kind of a paradigm shift in our case. And I like kamote. So I used to live in Singapore, and I really like the Japanese sweet kamote. Then my Singaporean friend told me, oh, if you're here in Singapore and you like eating that kind of tuber, you will be looked down upon, because only the less like to eat that. But I was talking about it. Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. So it's, I think you're right. What you've all said is education, but it's also the effort to really change the mind conditioning of Filipinos, of what they consider to be good eating or luxurious eating. I mean, just to share, in my own home, some would always think that to have meat would mean that's the luxury. But I always say that you don't need to eat meat to feel that you're eating well, right? Because I often say it takes 3 or 4 days to digest. So it's that change of mindset. At ang pangkaraniwan na Pilipino kasi also is pag nag-beef ka or pork, yun yung treat, right? Yun yung wow. Ang swerte, meron tayong baboy at meron tayong baka today. Ganun eh. Oo, when it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, Dr. Zamora, is there anything the ordinary Filipino can do to just help save the environment?
Like from what I just read, no, since I was invited to this talk. For example, we can simply unplug our appliances when they're not in use. For me, like for example, in every room I have a charger. In all my clinics, there's a charger available waiting for me because my phone always dies. So that's one thing. We can just simply unplug them. And for the youth and for those who like to cook, I've seen several social media videos. For example, on Twitter, I saw a guy who is able to recycle his banana peels and into bacon. Ang galing niya. So, maraming ways to decrease waste. And then, also not just in food, but also in fashion, diba, there's a move now for slow fashion, using the reusing clothes, and not just that, but purchasing less. And yung mga
You say
na,
a consciousness,
yes,
starting with just being more conscious
with what you use and what you need.
Yes, yes. Dr. Cabral is raising her hand, and I apologize, ma'am. I didn't see this sooner. Dr. Cabral?
Oh, it's okay, Karen. I was just going to say that we should not forget the intimate relationship between population, health, and environment. And I am pointing to the fact that when we say, what can we do? What we can do, for example, is to make sure that we manage our family size. People can do that, right? Just have the number of children that you can adequately feed, clothe, and educate. The number of people in the world is already far above the carrying capacity of the planet. And if we keep adding more, no amount of managing waste is going to do it, because people are just going to produce more and more waste. So that's one. Second is, on a personal action basis, one thing that we can do is we can ditch single-use plastics if we cannot reuse or recycle them. So those are very important things that I think we can think about. And in this time of COVID, particularly healthcare workers, but everybody else, everybody uses face masks and face shields. We should make sure that we dispose of these face masks and face shields, as well as the personal protective equipments, properly.
Yeah. What is the right way, just very quickly, to dispose of face mask, Dr. Cabral?
Well, you have to segregate them, because they are also made from fossil fuel and plastic, and they're plastic derived. So you need to consider them as plastics.
Yeah.
And you have to dispose of them like plastic.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Very quickly, some questions here also. Maybe for all of you, is Romel Arobang is asking, how can we motivate the general population, especially the poorest of the poor, to become part of the solution in addressing the issues of climate change? Should we impart fear, meaning show them the drastic drawbacks of climate change to the people so they will be more aware of its consequences? What's a good method? Dr. Estuar, you can start.
I think we should provide more opportunities for them to contribute, no? So for example, motivating them to collect and segregate, and then giving some reward, let's say food in exchange, no? I see
Good
that
one.
in
That's
other
very good.
aspects. Oh, diba?
Incentivize.
Yeah, so incentivize. So magko-collect ka ng plastic bottles, pag in exchange mo siya, may food ka. Diba? So that's a very practical application. That's something that's doable. You don't need to set up a lot of things. No? So mga ganon, saan natin siya dadalhin at ano yung makukuha natin in return. So that's just one example that we can do and practice.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody? Dr. Amara, would you want? Or Dr. Gudran?
Yeah, can I answer that?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I think, paano natin mahihikayat lahat? I think we should start with education. Tama yung comment nila. Education, however, marami na kasing matitigas ang ulo. So ang chance natin is, bata pa lang, turuan na natin. Although the effect will be several years in the future. Pero we have to start educating them para after this amount of time, maayos na yung konsepto nila. I-apply na lang nila. Kasi pag ngayon talaga matatanda na, mahirap nang baguhin ang isip. So we should start with children sa school level pa lang. Diba? Like Japan, na yung responsible citizenship nila, in-instill nila sa nursery, sa kindergarten, pagpasok pa lang.
Actually, a subject, you're right. Responsible citizenship, yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Dr. Gudran. Dr. Amara?
For myself, I think the living conditions of the poorest poor something should be done to improve the quality of their living conditions, and this can only be done at the government level. As we have seen before in my presentation, the environmental conditions will influence the gut microbiome of these people, which will influence their health. So exposing them to a cleaner, a more civilized living conditions, that will in itself will set off like a domino effect of effects to help improve the health of the nutrition and address the climate change.
Oo. O may tanong dito, is TikTok a good platform to open the discussion of climate change? I think I can answer that. Any platform is a good platform, right? Any platform that speaks to the new generation would be. Dr. Gregorio, Professor Gregorio, how would you add the poorest of the poor as part of the solution?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I always mention you have to incentivize, because the poorest among the poor they are already always thinking of, they're hungry, what I could get on this one, because they might be affecting the environment because they have no food. Yeah. Kahit ikaw naman, pag pamilya mo wala makakain, you'll do everything. Papatayin mo yung dolphin, puputol ka ng kahoy para maibenta mo. But you have to incentivize them, give them sila mag-care ng environment nito, and the government will provide some. It will start from that. Then they will be aware, educating them, then they will be aware of how it will affect their livelihood. So you will always relate it to their livelihood and their family. So
yeah. What about you, Dr. Geraldine, Dr. Zamora? Is there how can we include and I guess the word is also inspire the poorest of the poor to be part of the solution?
I think fear will not be a viable option, because sa totoo lang, sila na yung parang they've experienced the worst already. They're really the ones who have been there when the Ondoy typhoon the country. They were the ones who were most affected by leptospirosis because they were the ones na binaha. Lahat talaga, sila talaga yun. So I'm not sure if fear is the best. It's the best way to go. And I agree with the panelists that incentivizing would be the key, because di ba para lang yan yung reward system when you're raising a child. Is it going to be papagalitan mo parate, or you reward or praise good behavior? So I think the latter should be better. And maybe to comment on that question about TikTok, I really believe that we should use all platforms. And even in health, we've been starting to use TikTok, even if we look funny, gumaganon-ganon kami. And we just, as long as you're able to put forth your message and people are able to take it in, because a lot of, a big portion of the population do not like serious talks.
Yes.
Like it when you're entertained.
Yes.
You really have to be creative in sending out the message. Kasi parang, even if I'm already middle-aged, when I think about talks like these, parang feeling ko, bata pa ako eh. What more our youth, no? In reality, hindi na ako bata. So we should really try to use all platforms that they are in. Ang dami na actually, meron pa nga mga Kumu and others that I haven't personally tried. Yeah. And it would be a good way to reach the next generation who might be able to save our planet, really. Kasi sa totoo lang, mahirap nang baguhin yung mga matatanda na rin or yung matitigas yung ulo. I agree with Dr. Gregorio on that.
All right. Well, I think we've had a very wonderful discussion. It's the topic that it's quite big actually, because health in itself is already a topic that's big. Mental effects is big already as a topic too. Farming in itself could be a whole forum. But before I get somebody to close this. I won't say who sent this to me, but this is just funny that I have to say. It says, also get the richest of the rich, Karen, to stop buying multiple cars, SUVs that are gas guzzlers, air cons, etc. Government can increase taxes on these climate affecting aspirations among the well-to-do. And that's good. It's also saying that in terms of policy, government can make changes in terms of policy that will improve and at least help revert climate change. If you make it hurt where it hurts, right? It's like having carbon tax emissions. If you make it hurt and you make it hurt the pocket, then you have certain businessmen that will be forced to go the other way, right? So before we end this webinar, first of all, I want to thank all of you for your questions and active participation. It's been such an insightful event, and I'm sure that after this test might want to be focusing on specific topics because really there's so much to learn for all of us. And before we end, I'd like to welcome on our screens our rapporteur, Dr. Michael Angelo Promentilla, one of the 2013 Outstanding Young Scientists and currently the head of Waste and Resource Management Unit of the Center for Engineering and Sustainable Development Research of De La Salle University, to give us a synthesis of the talks today. Good morning to you, Dr. Angelo.
Thank you, Karen. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. There are many information and insights that we can derive from this panel presentation and discussion actually. I hope I will do justice in synthesizing and distilling the essence of this webinar. This webinar, entitled Addressing the Challenges of Climate Change on Food and Nutrition Security and Health, is organized by the National Academy of Science Technology, Philippines, also known as NAST. This is in partnership with TOWNS, the Outstanding Women in Nation Services. The webinar was formally opened by our NAST president, by Academician Aurea Matias in behalf of our NAST president, Academician Rod Asalanza, by welcoming all the participants and highlighting the importance of this webinar. Please allow me to reiterate the overall goal of this CLIMA webinar. First is to determine the vulnerability of the Philippine development as climate change risks interact with the other stressors like the COVID-19 pandemic. Second is to identify key strategies to build back better from the ruins of the COVID-19 pandemic while simultaneously addressing the impacts of climate variability and extreme events. Third is to harness the potential of science, technology, and innovations to put Philippines into a pathway of climate resilient and sustainable development, considering these multiple stressors we face under this new normal. And finally, to recommend measures to strengthen policies and governance systems to realize a climate resilient and sustainable development in the Philippines. Kung makikita po natin, masalimuot at madiwara ang mga problemang kakaharapin natin at kinaharap natin ngayon sa Pilipinas. With this, the first of the webinar series focuses on the nexus of climate change and health and food security and nutrition. Ms. Karen Davila introduced our esteemed panelists and reactors to present their views on these issues. Our first panelist, Dr. Gundram, presented about climate change and health, highlighting how climate change can aggravate the impact on disasters and its effect on health. He mentioned as well that the poor and vulnerable will be disproportionately impacted by these future changes of climate extremes, considering Philippines is top 5 in terms of being disaster prone. To name a few, he described the effect of extreme temperature, which will result, of course, to heat wave such as heat stroke, and of course, extreme events such as intense typhoons on how it will affect our mental health. He also enumerated other effects of climate change on health that can be attributed to vector-borne diseases such as dengue, waterborne diseases such as cholera, foodborne illness such as diarrhea, and respiratory diseases such as asthma. Dr. Gundran ended this talk by enumerating some action points for citizens. To name a few, he encouraged citizens to plant more trees and to have a low carbon footprint lifestyle. I think in the discussion, it this issue keeps on being discussed. He also recommended to prevent transmission of diseases by having good hygiene practice and improving household sanitation and proper waste management system. Dr. Cabral then provided her response to Dr. Gundran's presentation. She highlighted that climate change is a public health emergency. Resiliency of healthcare system is thus needed, and we have to note that climate-sensitive diseases are some of the leading causes of death. You can call it morbidity and mortality globally. Air pollution, including water and soil pollution, are environmental risks to health that contribute to these diseases. On one hand, human activities, such as our health practices, is also a driver of climate change. She mentioned and challenged the health industry because they also contribute to our global warming anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions. Quoting Dr. Cabral, I like this wording. Our planet is our patient too. That's why we should take care of it to have our sustainable future. Our second panelist, academician Gregorio, presented about climate change and food security, highlighting climate change, that it excludes no one, and of course, it directly affects our food security. He then proposed the need for a transformative systemic change of our agri-food system. He underscored the powerful role of youth to advocate such changes as we rethink food security and encourage curiosity for research, innovation, and business. He also mentioned the interconnectivity of academia, private sectors, or industries and government for the whole value chain. As for the key points that he mentioned, climate change in agriculture is not just our problem, but also a driver for research and business. And he introduced this concept of transformative farm or transform. For example, agriculture must be treated as a business or an industry where our farmers should be equipped to be agripreneurs. It's basically a juxtaposition of being an agriculturist or a farmer and an entrepreneur. So we may call this as transformers. We need to be more competitive by lowering the cost of production of these food commodities. He also emphasized that science and technology would play an important role to address these challenges brought by climate change in agriculture. He enumerated some researches that would enable our agri-food system to be more resilient to climate change. These include climate change-ready crops varieties, the quality of seeds or hybrids, the mechanization or modernization of our farms through industrial revolution technologies, smart fertilization, and of course, some other water-saving technologies such as drip irrigations. Academician Gregorio also ended his talk by a call to action. We need to work together like the Avengers. So, Superman, this is DC Italy, no? Maybe Thor is not enough in order to solve this problem. We need a team, and we have to inspire the youth to be heroes of our food security and use their massive power to hold the decision makers accountable. Then Dr. Estuar provided her response to academician Gregorio's presentation. She highlighted the sense of urgency in addressing food security as we need to think and plan ahead. She reiterated how climate change can be impacted by food security. And this is also one thing that I would like to emphasize. She mentioned about food waste as one of our challenges. Inclusivity, accessibility, interconnectivity are the key factors to sustainability. These are the keywords that she mentioned. And I think this is where the business models would come in. To outsmart climate change, I like this phrase. We have to look at things differently through systems thinking. That is looking at food systems composed of several systems from the whole value chain or supply chain, that is from production and consumption. Dr. Estuar emphasized the need to rethink farming and engage youth on how we do science for food security. Our third panelist, Dr. Amara, presented about climate change and nutrition, highlighting the gut microbiota connection. She discussed how environmental stressors and climate change can influence nutrition through the changes in gut microbiota. These are the microorganism microbes in your intestine and in your stomach. She described this technical term known as gut dysbiosis, where the microbes in our gut become unbalanced. And in that case, pathogenic microbes predominate that cause these diseases. Dysbiosis can cause by changes in the microbial ecosystem in the environment brought by climate warming. So this is how you can understand the connection of climate change to the microbiota. And of course, she highlighted also how the unhealthy diet, okay? She emphasized Western diet, so I don't know whether she's talking as well as Filipino diet of high sugar and high fat, which could lead to this gut dysbiosis. And of course, this also have a negative impact on our environment, this kind of dietary patterns. She mentioned a study describing the high intake of meat and sweetened beverages among Filipino adults, which contributed to a greater risk for non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and high cholesterol. She further explained this by describing the changes in gut microbiota composition in several diseases such as obesity and cardiovascular diseases. So kung anong kinakain natin pala, no, maapektuhan yung mga microorganisms na nasa tiyan natin. That's why, no, she emphasized how nutrition can be used to mitigate the stress inflicted by the environment and climate change. And she mentioned the role of the gut microbiota. She also enumerated action points for citizens. For example, she recommended to increase our intake of non-digestible carbohydrates from vegetables. So kung naalala pa niyo yung kanta ng Bahay Kubo, so kung mas marami kayong kinakain na nagagaling sa Bahay Kubo, mas maganda. Fruits, legumes, seeds, and unrefined whole grains to provide substrate for gut microbe and improve our immune function. Dr. Amara also advised us, for me, this is very difficult, to reduce intake of sugars because I have a sweet tooth. Artificial sweeteners, sugar-sweetened foods, and processed foods, as these foods increase the abundance of pathogenic gut microbes that will reduce our immune resistance. Then Dr. Zamora, our reactor, provided her response to Dr. Amara's presentation. She highlighted how climate change can impact our human health and nutrition through these gut microbes. And she was very thankful to know more about this from our speaker. Our gut microbiota actually aggravates the severity of COVID-19 diseases of an individual. And this is actually, we need to consider as well in the time of pandemic. She reiterated the action points such as having sustainable food source with lower carbon footprint. She also emphasized to reduce intake artificial sweeteners, which is personally relevant to her. And of course, in the open forum, there were issues and concerns that were raised. So as a systems engineer who's trained to look at problem systems, I really agree with all the points being raised. In fact, I will consider this as a messy and wicked problem. Climate change itself is a wicked problem. And when you try to find the connection between food security, health, whether it's individual health or personal health, whether it's population health, and also nutrition. It is really a wicked problem if you look at this by providing a solution without thinking the interconnection among these systems. So the issues raised like hospital waste management, how we can manage this properly. How about the sense of urgency of climate change, especially now we are experiencing this pandemic? How we can educate our common Pinoy, our farmers, even our health practitioners. Because what is being emphasized during the discussion is, one, there is still a lack of awareness in this nexus, in this connection among climate change, health, food security, and nutrition. And in fact, I can see how the food systems will be the heart of this nexus, because the environment is both a driver and an outcome of this food system. And of course, health is also another concern. So there are things that were raised, such as modernization of farming. Are we lagging behind with our neighbors? What is really our problem? And in this case, I think one of the main points that were raised is the weak implementation. We have many laws, we have many regulations, but we have weak implementation. And also, one presenter emphasized that we should rethink on how we do public service. And this time, we need political will to implement those regulations. There are things that were mentioned, such as how to eat cleaner food, how to be more green as a citizen. And I think there are several ways to look at this, like how we can change our dietary patterns, like reducing meat consumption, how we should dispose our waste even at the household level, and how we advocate this to our community. And in this case, I think another solution that the presenters or the discussants are looking at is the enablers like technology, like digital platforms and social media, wherein we can disseminate, we can inform the general public, and of course, it also be a platform for knowledge exchange. And in this case, it's also mentioned that the poor should play an important role. But I think not only the poor, the middle class, the rich and the richer, we should work together as one nation in order to address this climate change. And in this case, there are many ways to address this, like how to incentivize the consumers, whether it's poor, middle class, or rich, how we can provide soft structure interventions aside from the hard structural interventions. As a systems engineer, my always question is how to social engineer so that we can change the behavior of our stakeholder. And in this case, we need to know, we need to adapt to the, how they say, capriciousness of the millennials or the new generation. And these are the things that were raised in this open forum. Marapatin po niyo ako na sumahin ang buo ng talakayan tungkol sa pagtugon sa mga hamon ng pagbabago sa klima. Bagamat maraming balakid na nakita ninyo sa pag-uusap, tulad ng kailangan pa rin natin ng maraming kaalaman at may mga bagay na hindi pa rin tayo tiyak ang kasagutan na nangangailangan ng panaliksik. Isa lamang po ang aking natitiyak na ang ating pagtugon sa ganitong kalaking hamon ay mangangailangan ng malawakan at pangkalatang solusyon at higit sa lahat, mapanuring sistema para sa pagbabago kung saan bawat sektor, kahit may hirap, mayaman, o ano man ang estado nyo sa buhay, mula sa gobyerno, mula sa pribadong grupo, mula sa komunidad, at sa akademya, ay maaaring mag-usap at magtulugan upang humanap ng komprehensibong solusyon. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much. That was a great synthesis, Dr. Promentilla. Thank you so much, sir. And now to formally close this event, let us all welcome the President of Towns Foundation, Mrs. Orenia Drilon.
Salamat, Karen. Ako, na-stress drilon ako sa sobrang laki ng problema ng crisis natin sa klima, sa lahat ng mga insights na nanggaling sa ating mga panelists, nakaka-overwhelm. But what a fascinating morning. And I'd like to tell you that this is not the last. Please join us on September 10. We have another, this is a series of talks, and this is the first one because of the gravity of the problem. So we will see you on September 10. Our discussion will cover forest, water, and marine ecosystems and how climate change is affecting these ecosystems. So gusto ko lang idagdag rin po, maraming salamat by the way kay Rex Victor Cruz, the chair of the NAST Task Force on Climate Change, for a well-organized webinar, one of the most informative I've attended during this pandemic. Napansin ko lang na merong isang nagtanong na dapat tama na ang mga papers, tama na ang talk, dapat action. Tama rin naman, pero dapat siguro malaman natin ang totoong sitwasyon ng kalagayan ng ating planeta at ng ating bansa bago tayo magkaroon ng malawakang action plan para ma-address itong problema. So maraming pong salamat, especially to the questions also, to the participants who sent such insightful questions. We hope to see you again on September 10. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pagdalo. Back to you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Ces, and congratulations, Ces, for this forum. Now, in behalf of NAST Philippines and Towns Foundation, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this morning. It's been a pleasure on my part. I also learned so much from all our panelists. Kindly answer our short survey before leaving the Zoom webinar. Participants who accomplish the evaluation form are entitled to receive a certificate of participation. Please follow NAST official Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts flashed on your screens. Thank you all, and God bless you.